Hello, test, test. Hey guys. So I know you guys are all working in here, and we're not going to interrupt that. But anybody who wants to see the Android presentation might want to come forward, or you could stay back there. I just don't want to. I was working here before, and I don't want to make you guys all be quiet. So if you guys want to work and talk, like I don't care. I can't stop you, obviously. Just like either go up to the top or just probably go up to the top, and Android people come back down, or you don't have to move at all. Doesn't matter to me. I'm just going to keep talking. So we're gonna get started in a bit. So any of the Android people, just make sure you're paying attention. The first thing we're gonna do is install software that you guys need, or one of the first things we're gonna do. So if you haven't done that yet, you might want to do that. If you can't find the list, it's okay. We're about to go over it. That's what most of that's what most of this first session is going to be about, or part of it. So you don't have to worry if you don't have the software yet.
How's everyone doing? So who here is actually for the Android talk? All right, so pretty much everyone in here. Nice. Well, I am Matt Porter. Well, is this loud enough or too loud? Too loud? Good. Okay, so I'm Matt Porter. On the left, I've always loved computers, and that's me when I'm like 10. So, I've done lots of Android development, iOS development, web development. Web development's my baby, but I also love Android. So. And our other speaker is Gus.
Hi guys, I'm Gus Smith. Pretty much the same thing. I've been doing a lot of Android development. Like any other thing that I've learned in computer science before I came to college, my knowledge of Android is fairly self-taught. So like, there's a lot of gaps in my knowledge. The best way to learn from me is ask me questions. We're going to give this presentation, but I'm going to also be walking around later on. Please ask me questions about Android because a lot of my knowledge, like I said, has big gaps in it, and it might take a question to remind me of something that you need to be taught.
Yeah, definitely. If you guys have any questions at any given time, like you might not understand something we say, just raise your hand, and we'll try to notice you, or just yell out like "Hey" or something, you know. So, I guess we'll get started.
Okay, so like you said, anytime there's questions, please just shout out because this first presentation is the only one of these three sessions that we're going to do as a kind of slideshow format. We really want to move away from that format. We don't want to just be presenting you guys straight information. That's boring. But this first slideshow we kind of have to do just because it's just the very basics. So the first thing we're going to do is the appropriate software. How many people here have worked with Android before? Okay, so not a lot of you who are here for the presentation. Okay, that's a good thing. But the only bad thing about it is that you guys have to get this software. How many people have actually gotten the software that's listed here? Oh, nice. Thumbs up if you have. Thumbs up if you got it and it's all good. Even Genymotion? Anybody have trouble with Genymotion? Nobody. Nice. Okay, so everybody else, please get Android Studio, and that's the very first thing you guys need. You can't do that without Android Studio. I mean, if you want to use if you want to use Eclipse, something like that, that's fine. But you need an IDE, and we're going to be doing it in Android Studio, and really, it's the best thing that you should be using right now. And then Genymotion, what Genymotion is it's an emulator. So if you don't have an Android phone, and even if you do have an Android phone, it may be easier to use Genymotion. It just runs. Yeah, there you go. So it's just running through VirtualBox, and it's just emulating an Android phone. If you have an Android phone and you've never actually developed on it, you may have driver issues the first time you try. And so for the cases of this, Genymotion is just going to solve those problems right away. So just use Genymotion. So we're going to give a little bit of time now for you guys to follow the Bitly link. The Bitly link up there. Uh-oh, it's covered up. We need to move it over. The Bitly link goes to this presentation. This presentation obviously has the links on it. Who does not have this software yet? Raise your hand. Okay. So we're going to give you like 5 minutes to start that download started. At least get the Android Studio download started. Once you guys have that, we'll start back up about 5 minutes from now. I just want to make sure you guys all have this because you can't do any of the rest of this without this software. So go ahead. If you don't have it, go ahead and get that.
Hey guys, if you need a Genymotion, not Genymotion, but Genymotion, it's a separate download if you haven't recognized that yet, and you also need a box. So if you haven't gotten either, and you don't have an Android device to test on, I highly suggest doing it. It doesn't take too long. They're good sized downloads, but the internet here is pretty fast. Android Studio does have an emulator, but it's not good. It's very slow. I don't know if they've made it better because once I found Genymotion, I just never went back because the Android emulator doesn't allow for all the wonderful features that Genymotion does. Genymotion basically is a full-fledged like virtual machine, so it allows you to install. It has persistence, and emulators built in don't. So The cool thing about Genymotion is you can install the Gaps, the Google Apps, which allows you to use Google services, so you can test push notifications more easily than you would be able to through normal.
All right, guys, we're going to start back up. So this is going to be a short presentation with a lot of room for questions. We're not actually going to start writing any of the code in this section yet. Like I said, this first session is purely a very high-level overview, and we really want you guys to ask as many questions as you possibly have, especially questions about, is my environment set up correctly, because that's really the basics. Okay, so the basics of what we're going to go over. Okay, so the basics of what we're going to go over right now are how Java is different from Android Studio. Oh, there we go. Yeah. So how Java is different from the Android language, or the Java API is different from the Android API. Then the Android programming model, including the basic structure of an app, and then lastly is UI. These are just very, very high level things. So first, how is Java different from Android? So one of the key components to realize here is, and one of the first things you learn about Java is that Java runs on a virtual machine. That's why everyone loves Java so much. It's portable because you can run it on whatever machine you want. So Android, though it's written in Java, it doesn't actually run on a Java virtual machine on the phone itself. They have their own virtual machine that it compiles to, and it runs on that. That difference really doesn't make that big of a deal. One thing you will notice structurally, you won't notice that difference, but one thing you will notice is that the structure of how the programs are written is different. So our summary up here is pretty concise and does a good job. So in Java, your classes do one thing and they do it well. You really want to split everything up into different classes just to basically granularize everything. In Android, however, it's different. They do one thing, but under that thing is many other things. So you might have a whole activity, which is a whole screen of your app represented by one class. And in that class, there are many different actions that might be taken, different things you need to account for. Okay, so there are three main components in an Android app, at least looking from the programmatic standpoint. And these are, again, this is very high level, so please, anytime you have questions, please stop me and ask about them, any clarifications I can make. There are activities, there are services, and there are content providers. Now, services and content providers, we're not going to be going over that much in this presentation. They're really not going to be important to us because we're being very basic. But basically what they are, services are just apps that or activities that run in the background or processes that run in the background. So that could be things interfacing with Wi-Fi or with other data, or things that are basically just long-running tasks. And content providers are accessing databases and other data structures. So those are two things we're not going to be doing very much, or to the extent that we need to talk about these in great depth. However, let's go on to the next slide. Oh, we already got it. Activities are extremely important. Activities are really the meat of what we're going to be talking about. And an activity, the easiest way to think about an activity is that it is just one screen of your app. So this image indicates pretty well what an activity is. You have one activity open, and then pushing a button, doing something, opening up a search, taking a picture, any of that will trigger another activity opening. So Android is pretty modular in the sense that it passes off, an activity does one thing and then it will pass off another action to another activity.
So a good example is whenever you download an application for the first time, you usually get that little tutorial where you swipe and you have to watch stuff. That's one activity. Another example of an activity could be a login screen. That's an activity. Another one could be if you have an Android device where you swipe between views, the entire content is an activity. So you don't want to get activities and fragments confused, but we'll go on later into what fragments actually are.
And so, like I said before, how in Java you split things up into classes. Well, an activity in a lot of senses is going to be the classes that you're handling most of the time. Every activity that you have has a class, and within that class, there's a lot of things that happen, a lot of different events. Actually, so like I said, a lot of different events, a lot of different things you have to handle. So one activity has any activity has what's called a life cycle. And so the life cycle of an activity basically goes like this. On create in the very bottom left corner is when that specific activity is created. Like the first time an app is open, then the main activity is created. Exactly, like your main method. It's the first thing that's going to be executed when you tap on that little app icon. Then we're going to go on to onStart. You don't have to worry about that. That's it. It is different from onCreate, but you can imagine them being basically the same thing. It's created and then it's started. Yeah.
So basically, on create, you can think about it. If you're loading data from a database, you need to fetch that data before the view is created. Or if you're more advanced, you could create the view, show a little loading dialog, pull the data in, and then on start, right? Yeah, on start is where you start displaying the data. So that's the difference.
And then from there, we assume that your activity is just started. It's just displaying on the screen. So after onStart is called, your activity is just straight on the screen. The user can see it, interact with it, whatever. Now let's say they take a phone call in the middle of that, or some other app pops up a notification for them that they go and answer. In that case, we're going to go over to on pause. Yes, on pause. So yeah, so we're going to go over to on pause. So in that case, the activity is paused. It's not being shown at all. And then eventually it will be resumed. So we'll go back up to resume. So anytime that a phone call comes in, anytime you switch away from that activity, you have to be aware of the fact that that activity is still running. It's still there in the background. The only case that it wouldn't be there in the background is if we go down to it being stopped. In that case, on stop is called. Inside the app, you handle whatever you need to do when you're closing your app, and then eventually it gets destroyed. And in that case, when you switch over to another app, that activity is no longer running. It's completely gone.
So here's an example of the life cycle we just talked about. This is just a little app I made that we're going to actually be building later in the next 2 sessions. So it's called Tasker. It's like a to-do app. So when I clicked it, it generated. But right now I don't have any tasks. Well, they are. They loaded. So that was the on create. Now if we want to pause it, that's pausing. Now if we go back in and open it again, that's on resume. And then if we just close it completely, that's destroyed. So that's the basic life cycle.
And for context, just to come back to what I said before, so we were talking about how activities will be kind of like the main classes that you'll be handling. Within each activity, or within each activity class, all these methods that you see here, on create, on start, etc., those are all overrides that you're going to be taking care of. So when you first create an activity method, there are a few basic methods that will be overridden. Like on create is probably the most basic of all of them. So that will be overridden by default. And then all of these other ones, if you ever need to handle any of those events, you're going to be overriding them within your activity app. So at this point, are there any questions before we move on? This is pretty much the main point of this first presentation. So are there any questions about activities? I know it's a very high level view. Okay, so this isn't as important, and this is much easier than activities. This is just so when you're actually doing your UI, your UI is written in XML files, which a lot of people don't like, but it's really not that bad. It's pretty easy to do once you first start doing it. And the very good thing about using Android Studio, their drag and drop it's not perfect, but it'll work for what we're doing. So you barely have to touch the XML all that much. But here we go. This is a perfect example of what the XML looks like. So if you've ever written any HTML, it's the same concept. It's just a purely hierarchical structure. And then within each of these XML files where you're defining your UI, you're taking a layout of some kind, a layout that specifies how each item is going to be arranged inside, and then within that layout, you're putting a series of views. So in this case, we have text views, which are just literally just text in boxes, edit text, which are like text views, except you can edit them, etc. So it really is a lot like HTML. So we have this XML file. Where do we go from there? Well, the XML file actually gets what's called inflated by the activities in their onCreate methods. So what happens is you reference your XML file within your onCreate method. The virtual machine expands or inflates that XML file into a view, and then it displays it on the screen. It's pretty simple stuff. It might seem a little bit intimidating at first, but all you really have to know is that we write our UI in XML, its basic structure, and then we inflate it actually programmatically once we get to the onCreate method of the activity life cycle. And of course, you can do it in different places, but it's usually onCreate when you're first starting your app that you're going to inflate and display your UI. And this, we just showed this, but this is a basic image of what another XML file might look like and the corresponding result. This is kind of a weird example, but it works. And so that's the end of our very first basic eye-level session. This is really meant for you to give you guys a 1,000-foot view of what we're about to do, and also to have you guys download this there. So at this point, any questions before we move on? Please, anything? Yeah, up there in the back, yell it down. Yeah, so the PowerPoint should be available at the bit.ly link that is on one of the other slides. It's on all except it's occluded. There you go. Perfect. So that's the PowerPoint. If you guys need the links, whatever, it's all in there. Any other questions?
Yeah. So I guess since you asked the question, we can kind of get into it. So he asked, are there any super helpful libraries? Which I'm assuming external third-party ones that you can download. Yeah, there's billions. Well, not billions, but a few thousands. No, exaggerations. So I guess we can kind of talk about what the IDE looks like because that kind of goes hand in hand with it. Yeah, since no one had questions, we can kind of move on. So the Android layout, they follow this build script called Gradle. If you guys have ever done the older Android, they use the Maven. Gradle is kind of like a better version of that. So if you look at your studio, we have their Gradle script over here. Let's see which one is it. Okay. So when you have your studio project open, there's Gradle scripts, and there's two separate ones. You want to do the module app. So this is, anytime you click the play button or run or compile, it runs this Gradle script, and it syncs up. So at the bottom, you can see dependencies down here. If I make it a little bit bigger for you. Is that big enough for everyone to see? I'll make it a little bit bigger. Okay, so here's dependence. Those are basically the libraries. So what happens is you can go to the Gradle website, and there will be a search bar where you can search for like a library. If it's not there, you can just use Google, and it's a jar file that you download, and then you put it into your your libs folder here, the libraries. So like I downloaded the parse library, so I put in my library folder, but then my build script knows to look in this directory for these jar files, and then it automatically puts them. On the other hand, if that library exists in the Gradle repository, you can just put the actual package name in there, and it will download it on its own. So you don't even have to worry about it. So it makes it super useful where you don't have to download and you don't even have to package the libraries kind of. So if you're using Git, most of the time you don't want to upload all the different node modules or packages or any of that type of stuff. So what you have to do is just put in your dependencies, and then when someone does a git pull, they just do Gradle build, and it will download everything for them.
Okay. Any other? Did that answer your question well enough? Were you looking for specific libraries? Okay. All right. What is it? Okay, so a library repository for Android that you guys might want to look up, we're going to link it right now, or we're going to put it on the screen, is android-arsenal.com. So this is just a bunch of libraries for Android that are extremely useful. When you guys are coming up with later app ideas, you can look through here. We're not going to be using, I don't think we need to use any of these. In the advanced version of this, the advanced section of this, we're going to be using a little bit of parse to do data. However, we shouldn't need any big add-ons from where we are right now. All right, any other questions? Anybody? Okay. In that case, we're just going to move on, talk about Android Studio. How many people again have Android Studio installed right now and can use it? Okay, that's a good amount of people. How many people are in the process of installing it? All right, that's pretty much everyone else. Perfect. Okay, so yeah, let's do that. So we're gonna just start a new project. We're just gonna. So this is the first screen that you guys will see after you do the installation. There are a couple of options when we go ahead and start a new Android Studio project. Well, yeah, let's just run through this first. This is just basic stuff that you guys need to fill out. It's okay. Okay, so this first screen you guys are going to see is what API we're building for. Android's APIs are now up to 22. Unfortunately, the API number, like this two-digit number here, does not correspond there's no easy way to tell what 22 is in terms of like, is it 5.0, is it 5.1, etc. 22 is 5.1, I think. 5.0.1. That's what we're going to be building for. Are we building for? You're going to do 21. Okay, so we're going to be building for 21, which is Lollipop. Don't worry if you guys don't have a Lollipop phone. Like I said, we're going to be using Genymotion, and that'll handle it fine.
Yeah, if you don't want to use Genymotion but just your device for this, everything programmatically that we're going to do is going to be the same. The only thing that might be different is how the GUI looks. So the colors might be weird or different looking than ours, but for the most part, the important stuff will be pretty much the same. It's just 21 comes defaulted when you install right now. So
yeah, and basically what he said, if you target for 21, you can run it on other phones. You don't have to worry. You don't have to worry about that. Like, you can go back if you can't go forward. As you know, backwards compatibility is pretty big in Android, and it's nice. It does work. Okay, so here is a great first screen. So this is kind of like starting off with their templates. These are the templates that they're going to give you to start with, and a lot of them are actually, pretty much all of them are really useful. These are really nice places for them to start. And we're actually going to use one of these, not just the blank activity, later on, because they really set it up nicely for you. It's nice. It's nice to just plug and play. So if we start just now with a blank activity, what we're going to get is exactly that, a blank activity. And it'll be nice. We can show you guys the structure of the app by showing you a blank activity. So we're just going to let it be blank activity. It might take a little bit. Don't worry about it. It didn't crash. most likely. And then what you're thrown right into, is actually your main activity XML. So let's, okay. It's just gonna make the font higher quick. You guys see that? Can you guys in the back see that? Anybody who's watching, can you guys see it? Thumbs up, thumbs down in the back. Thumbs up, thumbs down. We need a little bit higher. Thumbs up, thumbs down still. But still iffy. Make it higher, make it higher. All right, perfect. Oh, I mean, that works. That's fine. Okay, so this is our activity. And this is really, I mean, I've said it 1,000 times. This is really the hub. This is the center. This is what you guys should take out of this. If from any of these talks, it's learning about activities, the activity lifestyle, and the basic structure of an activity. I wasn't joking when I said that this would be the main class that you guys are handling, is your activity class. Luckily, in this case, we're going to be only using one activity, I think, right? We're just using one activity. And a lot of the simple, you can even make pretty complex apps with a single activity. So you guys, we don't have to worry about switching to other activities right now. You just have to worry about your main activity. And so, as you can see, right away we have our onCreate override, and that's where we're going to do a lot of our initial stuff. You'll see later that's where we initialize a lot of our variables. We get our different objects from the UI.
One quick little point. If you look at the code here, you can see that there's a lot of super calls to the activity class. In normal Java, whenever you do an override, you usually completely replace the body method. More often than not, in Android, you still call the parent method, and then you just add on top of it. So that's why you can see, especially in onCreate, you more often not do super because you don't want to completely override it because the onCreate method itself is pretty complex. So.
And that actually brings up a more general point. Sorry, this wasn't at the beginning. For me, at least, one of the main points of learning Android, or one of the things I kept in mind, don't expect to understand everything at once. There are some things in the code that's auto-generated for you that you just need to let it go, let it do its magic, figure out what you're figuring out, and then go on later. Once you understand more of the app, you can go on and figure out complex stuff. So some of these things that are just from the start built in there, you might not want to mess with it so much. If you have questions, please, by all means, ask us. We will do our best to explain what's happening. But Android is a very complex beast, and it's really nice and open for us to use, but there's still a lot of stuff that you might just not want to mess with. Okay, so one thing I would like to point out is, see that set content view in the onCreate? So that's exactly what I was saying when I said that we inflate and then display our XML. And actually, another good example is right below that in the onCreate options menu. You can see the inflation happen. You can see the inflation happen right there. It's inflating that menu main XML file. That's not actually the r.menu main. We'll explain that later. It's obviously not an XML file, but it's inflating that object, and then in this case, in our onCreate, it displays that. It sets the content view to that. So that's a very basic thing that. Oh, okay, I'll take that. So that's a very basic thing that we'll be doing. There was a question in the back left. Yeah. Here, I'm gonna come up there. I'm gonna come up there and listen because I can't hear you. So what his question was about was, if you guys start some of the projects in Android Studio, when you start them up from these default templates, they may not look exactly like this. For example, he was asking about the fact that his class declaration said public class main activity extends, and then it's an action bar activity. Now, action bar activity is just a subclass of activity. In this case, it's because he had selected his blank activity to have an action bar. It's basically the same thing. It's just going to have
Action bar inherits action bar. Action bar activity inherits the activity. So if you change it to action bar activity, nothing will really change it.
it's just basic inheritance. It's just allowing you to have more features. Basically. Any other questions about what we've gone over so far? No? Okay. Okay, so the last thing we'll do right now, and then we'll open it up for questions, and we'll come around the room and help you guys out. The last thing we're going to do is show you Android Studio's manipulation of these actual UI, the XML files. Like I said, it's not completely perfect, but it works. And also, we can just go ahead and edit the XML ourselves if it doesn't work how we want it to. So, like I said, if you guys have, how many people have done HTML in here? Oh man, not that many. Okay. Well, it's basic just hierarchical structure, and that's exactly what we're doing here. So, right now, it's obviously extremely basic. So we just have this first UI view is just a simple hello world. So Matt's going to go ahead and change something or other about it. Here, actually, go over to the code before you do anything, so they can see it. So this is what the code looks like. We have our relative layout, which is going to be pretty much your most useful version of a layout. You guys can use other layouts, but really relative layout is going to be the most useful for you with this app. And then we have a single text view. And in this text view, the text is this hello world. And you guys saw that on the pass screen. We literally just have our layout, which you can't see because it's wrapping everything. And then in that layout, the first thing is a text view. All right. So one of the big subjects in Android is resources. And I'm not going to go over it completely right now. And honestly, a lot of it is going to be answered in questions and in our next 2 sessions. But resources are basically a way to centralize everything. Centralize string. Describe concisely.
Okay, so let me get everything on one screen for you. It might make explaining it a lot easier. Alright, so you can't see on the right because it is kind of small. It just says your HackPSU and Hello World. That is Genymotion rendering what we actually made. So if you look on the left, top left up here, that is the XML for the view on the right. But looking at it, it says the @